The United States produces more weapons in a single year than most countries produce in a decade, and we're not talking about a small advantage. We're talking about an industrial capacity so massive that American defense contractors could simultaneously supply the militaries of dozens of countries while still equipping U.S. forces. And here's what makes this completely insane. Because the United States manufactures over 35% of all weapons sold globally and exports military equipment to over 100 countries and produces everything from fighter jets to aircraft carriers to missiles to tanks to drones at scales that seem almost impossible. And the numbers are staggering because American companies delivered over 50,000 missiles in 2022 alone and produced hundreds of combat aircraft and built multiple warships simultaneously and manufactured millions of rounds of ammunition. And all of this happens continuously year after year without slowdown. And when you compare this to other countries, the gap is terrifying, because Russia, which is supposedly a military superpower, produces fewer aircraft in a year than Boeing delivers in a month, and China, which has the world's second largest military budget, still can't match American production quality or quantity in advanced systems. And European countries combined produce a fraction of American output despite having similar population and wealth. And the question that defense analysts obsess over is how the United States built a weapons production capability so overwhelming that the rest of the world combined can barely compete. And the answer involves 7 specific reasons that work together like a machine, where each component amplifies the others. And when you understand these 7 mechanisms, you'll see why. American weapons production isn't just large, it's effectively unassailable and potentially terrifying in its implications for global power. And the first reason is something that started over 80 years ago and continues today. And that's the permanent war economy that emerged during World War II and never fully demobilized. And this created a defense industrial base that operates continuously rather than ramping up during conflicts and shutting down during peace. And here's how this changed everything, because before World War II, the United States would build weapons during wars and then close factories and lay off workers when wars ended. And this meant that at the start of each conflict, there was a delay while industry retooled and workers were trained. But after 1945, the Cold War created a perceived permanent threat, and this justified maintaining weapons production even during peacetime. And think about what this means structurally, because the United States has factories that have been building fighter jets continuously since the 1950s, and companies that have been producing missiles without interruption for 70 years, and shipyards that have been constructing warships in unbroken succession for decades. And this continuous production creates expertise that cannot be replicated quickly because the engineers and technicians and managers have decades of experience, and the supply chains are established and optimized, and the production processes are refined through millions of hours of operation. And compare this to countries that only produce weapons sporadically because they lack the institutional knowledge and the supplier relationships and the workforce skills that come from continuous operation. And Russia discovered this problem when trying to ramp up production for the Ukraine war, because factories that had been idle or operating at low capacity couldn't quickly scale up, and suppliers had gone out of business and skilled workers had retired. And here's the scale of the permanent war economy, because the United States spends over $800 billion annually on defense, and roughly half of that goes to procurement and research, which means $400 billion flowing into defense contractors every single year. And this sustained demand allows companies to maintain production lines and invest in automation and train workers and develop new technologies. And the system is self-perpetuating because defense spending creates jobs in congressional districts across all 50 states, and this creates political pressure to maintain spending regardless of actual threats. And the result is a military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned about in 1961 that has only grown larger and more entrenched. And the second reason is what actually makes American weapons technologically superior, and that's the massive investment in research and development that dwarfs what any other country spends and creates generations of advantage in critical technologies. And here's why R&D spending matters so much for weapons production. Because modern military systems are incredibly complex and incorporate cutting-edge technology in materials, science and electronics and propulsion and sensors. And the country that leads in these underlying technologies produces superior weapons and the United States spends over $100 billion annually on defense R&D, which is more than the entire military budgets of most countries, and this money funds research into technologies that won't see deployment for 10 or 20 years. And think about what this creates, because American defense contractors are currently developing sixth-generation fighter aircraft, while most countries are still trying to build fourth-generation capabilities in U.S. Companies are working on hypersonic missiles and directed energy weapons and autonomous systems and quantum sensors, and these next-generation capabilities will create advantages that last for decades. And compare this to other countries which spend far less on military R&D, because China spends perhaps $30 billion annually, and Russia spends maybe $10 billion, and European countries combined spend around $30 billion. And these smaller budgets mean they're always playing catch-up and trying to copy what America developed years ago. And here's the mechanism that makes this terrifying. Because R&D spending compounds over time, and early investments create knowledge that enables future investments. And the United States has been outspending everyone on military R&D since the 1950s, which means 7 decades of accumulated advantage. And this shows up in specific capabilities like stealth technology, which America developed in the 1980s and still leads in today, or precision-guided munitions, which revolutionized warfare and remain primarily American, or advanced radar systems that can track hundreds of targets simultaneously and beyond the direct military applications. There's also the spillover effect, because military R&D often creates technologies that have civilian uses, and this generates economic returns that partially offset the costs. And GPS started as military technology, and the internet came from DARPA, and advanced materials and manufacturing techniques often originate in defense research. And the third reason is something that gives American weapons production a permanent structural advantage, and that's the integration with commercial aerospace and technology industries, which means military production benefits from innovations happening in civilian sectors, and this cross-pollination doesn't exist at the same scale anywhere else. And here's how this works, because the United States has massive commercial aerospace companies like Boeing and SpaceX, and a huge technology sector with companies like Google and Microsoft, and these civilian industries push the boundaries of what's technically possible, and military contractors can leverage those innovations. And think about concrete examples, because Boeing produces both commercial aircraft and military aircraft, and the manufacturing techniques developed for the 787 Dreamliner using composite materials have applications for military aircraft. And SpaceX developed reusable rockets for commercial purposes, but that technology has obvious military applications for missiles and satellite launch, and technology companies develop advanced chips and software and AI systems for consumer markets, and those same technologies get incorporated into weapons systems. And compare this to countries where military and civilian industries are separate, because Russia has defense companies that operate independently from what little commercial aerospace exists, and China has tried to create commercial aerospace, but it's heavily controlled by the state and linked to military objectives rather than genuine market competition. And here's why the integration matters, because it means American weapons benefit from the innovation and efficiency of competitive markets rather than just government-directed development, and commercial companies are constantly pushed to reduce costs and improve performance. And these pressures create better manufacturing processes and better technologies. And when military contractors tap into this, they get capabilities that purely military-focused industries can't match. And the scale of American commercial aerospace and technology also means there's a huge base of suppliers and specialized companies, and these same suppliers often serve both military and civilian customers. And this dual use creates economies of scale. And the fourth reason is what actually enables the massive production volumes, and that's the automation and advanced manufacturing that American defense companies have invested in over decades. And this creates productivity advantages that allow smaller workforces to produce more weapons. And here's why manufacturing technology matters so much, because producing modern weapons requires incredible precision and consistency, and traditional manual manufacturing can't achieve the required tolerances or the production rates. And American companies have spent billions automating production lines and implementing robotic assembly and using computer-controlled machining. And this investment allows production at scales that manual processes couldn't match. And think about what this looks like in practice. Because Lockheed Martin's F-35 production line uses automated systems to position components and robotic tools to drill thousands of holes with perfect precision and computer systems to track every part and ensure quality. And this automation allows them to build over 150 aircraft per year with consistent quality, and compare this to countries using older manufacturing methods. Because manual assembly is slower and more error-prone, and requires larger workforces and can't achieve the same production rates, and Russia has struggled to produce more than a handful of Su-57 fighters annually, partly because their manufacturing processes are less automated, and China is trying to catch up on advanced manufacturing, but still relies heavily on manual labor for complex systems. And here's the compounding effect, because automation requires massive upfront investment, but then creates permanent cost advantages, because automated systems can run continuously and don't need breaks and maintain consistent quality. And this means American defense contractors can actually produce weapons more cheaply than countries with lower labor costs, because the productivity advantages outweigh wage differences. And beyond the direct production advantages, there's also the quality control element, because automated systems with computer monitoring can detect defects that human inspectors might miss, and this creates reliability that's critical for military systems. And the fifth reason is something that seems almost circular, but creates powerful incentives. And that's the massive export market for American weapons, which generates revenue that funds further development and production, and creates economies of scale that make American weapons cheaper, despite higher quality. And here's how the export market works, because the United States sells weapons to over 100 countries, and these exports totaled over $138 billion in recent years, and this export revenue partially offsets development costs and allows longer production runs. And think about the economics, because if the U.S. military orders 100 of a particular aircraft, the development costs get spread across those 100 units. But if foreign militaries order another 100, the development costs are already paid, and the additional production generates mostly profit. And longer production runs also allow manufacturers to optimize processes and negotiate better deals with suppliers, and this makes each unit cheaper. And compare this to countries that produce weapons primarily for domestic use, because they can't spread costs across as many units. And French weapons are excellent, but production runs are small, because France is the primary customer, and this makes French systems expensive and limits how much France can invest in development. And Russian weapons are cheap, but often lower quality, and production volumes have declined dramatically since Soviet times. And here's the strategic element, because American weapons exports also create dependencies, where countries that buy American systems need American parts and American training and American support for decades, and this locks them into American military relationships and often into American foreign policy alignment. And countries that operate F-16 fighters can't easily switch to Russian or Chinese aircraft, because their pilots are trained on American systems, and their maintenance is built around American parts, and their tactics are designed around American capabilities. And this creates long-term strategic advantages beyond the immediate revenue. And the sixth reason is what makes American weapons production truly scary, and that's the mobilization potential that exists, because of the industrial base and the supply chains and the engineering talent. And this means that current production, which is already massive, could be scaled up dramatically in a real crisis. And here's why mobilization potential matters. Because the weapons being produced now are peacetime production levels. And if the United States faced an existential threat, the industrial capacity exists to increase production by multiples. And think about what happened in World War II. Because the United States went from producing almost no military aircraft in 1939 to producing over 96,000 aircraft in 1944. And this demonstrated mobilization capacity that's almost unimaginable. And while that level of scaling might not be possible today, because weapons are more complex, the underlying capacity still exists. And American factories could run multiple shifts, and suppliers could expand rapidly, and the engineering workforce could be mobilized. And compare this to potential adversaries, because China has large manufacturing capacity, but most of it is oriented towards civilian goods, and converting those factories to weapons production would take time and require retooling. And Russia has limited industrial capacity and has struggled to even maintain current production levels, let alone scale up significantly. And here's the terrifying implication. because it means that in any prolonged conflict, the United States could potentially outproduce everyone else combined through industrial mobilization. And this capacity isn't just theoretical, because during the Cold War, the United States maintained plans and even some stockpiled machinery for rapid mobilization. And while those specific plans might be outdated, the industrial foundation still exists, and the knowledge of how to mobilize remains embedded in institutions. And the seventh and final reason ties everything together, and it's the global supply chain dominance, where American companies and their allies control critical inputs and technologies. And this means the United States can produce weapons while potentially denying adversaries access to key components. And here's how supply chain control works. Because modern weapons require thousands of components, from advanced semiconductors to specialized materials to precision parts, and American companies and allied nations produce many of these critical inputs and control the intellectual property and manufacturing processes. And this creates dependencies where countries trying to build weapons need access to American or allied suppliers. And think about specific examples, because advanced microchips that go into missiles and aircraft are primarily produced by companies in the United States and Taiwan and South Korea. And these chips require manufacturing equipment from Dutch company ASML, which operates under U.S. influence, and specialized materials like certain composites and alloys are produced by limited suppliers, often in the United States or allied countries. And this supply chain control means that countries trying to build indigenous weapons programs struggle to source components. And compare this to historical examples, because the Soviet Union tried to build a fully independent defense industrial base and succeeded to some degree, but at enormous cost and with technology that lagged Western standards. And China is currently trying to build supply chain independence, but discovering that advanced semiconductors and precision manufacturing equipment are extremely difficult to replicate. And here's the strategic weapon, because the United States can use export controls to prevent adversaries from accessing critical technologies. And this was done to the Soviet Union during the Cold War through COCOM restrictions, and is being done to China today through semiconductor export controls. And these restrictions don't just slow down adversary weapons programs, they can make certain capabilities essentially impossible to achieve without access to controlled technologies. And when you combine all 7 of these reasons together, you see why American weapons production is so overwhelming and genuinely terrifying in its implications. Because the permanent war economy means production never stops and accumulates decades of expertise, and massive R&D investment creates generational technology advantages, and integration with commercial industry provides innovation and scale, and advanced manufacturing enables high-volume production with consistent quality, and export markets generate revenue and economies of scale and mobilization. Potential means current production could be multiplied in crisis, and supply chain dominance creates dependencies and enables denial. And these 7 mechanisms work together in ways that compound over time, because R&D creates better weapons, which generate more export sales, which fund more R&D and manufacturing improvements, and continuous production maintains expertise, which enables mobilization, which deters challenges, which justifies continued investment. And the result is a defense industrial base that produces more weapons than all other countries combined, and could potentially produce even more if needed. And this capacity has profound implications for global power, because it means the United States can simultaneously supply its own military and arm allies and maintain strategic reserves, and still have surplus capacity. And this was demonstrated in the Ukraine conflict, where the United States provided tens of billions in weapons to Ukraine, while barely impacting its own readiness or production. And compare this to Russia, which ramped up production for the war but still struggled to replace losses, and had to turn to Iran and North Korea for additional supplies, in China, which has large production capacity in theory, but has never demonstrated ability to sustain high-intensity conflict and supply multiple theaters simultaneously. And here's why this is terrifying from a global perspective, because it means military challenges to American interests face not just the existing U.S. military, but the entire industrial capacity that could be mobilized. And the historical precedent is clear, because in World War II, Germany and Japan discovered that fighting America meant fighting American industry, and they couldn't win that contest, despite early military successes. And the same dynamic would likely apply in any future conflict, because American weapons production capacity remains unmatched, and the gap is actually widening rather than closing, because U.S. defense companies are investing in next-generation manufacturing and AI-assisted design and additive manufacturing, and these technologies will create even larger advantages. And understanding these 7 reasons shows that American weapons production dominance isn't temporary or vulnerable. It's the result of structural conditions built over 80 years and reinforced by continuous investment, and this production capacity is both a source of American power and a potentially destabilizing force in global politics because it creates such overwhelming advantages that other countries may feel they have no choice but to accept American preferences. And this is why the United States produces more weapons than all countries combined, and will likely continue to do so for the foreseeable future.